Hi guys, Ian Johnson from DriveSuccess.com. Today we're going to talk about Pareto charts, and we're going to use a Pareto chart in order to isolate and identify the most common causes of work stoppages and downtime in a manufacturing environment. Okay, so what I've done here today is I basically put up a table, and this table is actually based on a program and an analysis that I had done a couple of years back. And this table is basically a summary of all the causes of work stoppages during the period of 1 week. So I captured the most common causes of work stoppages, the number of times each one of these work stoppages occurred, correlating to the causes themselves, and then I determined the individual percentages and the total percentages, and I'll show you how this is done in terms of the calculation a little bit later on. And then I've used this table in order to see whether or not the Pareto distribution or principle applies. Okay, and I'm going to show you exactly how this table or this graph is put together. Okay. Now, first of all, before we get to all this, I just want to basically touch on where Pareto Principle comes from. The Pareto Principle comes from an Italian economist by the name of Vilfredo Pareto. And in 1906, he discovered that 80% of land ownership in Italy came from the top 20% of Italy's population. He also found this distribution model in his own garden. Okay? He found that 80% of his tomatoes were being produced by the top 20% of his tomato plants. And funny enough, 80% of his peas were coming from the top 20% of his pea pods. So it's a very unique distribution model, but it's used to define the issues pertaining to social inequality and wealth distribution, and it has its place in terms of business. And over the years, it's become known as the 80-20 revenue rule, or the 80-20 Pareto principle of revenue. And it basically states that 80% of a company's revenue comes from the top 20% of its customers. Okay? It can also be used in marketing. 80% of marketing leads typically come from the top 20% of marketing strategies. Okay? It can be used in inventory management. 80% of your fastest moving product lines, or 80% of your fastest moving inventory comes from the top 20% of your product offering. Okay? And it's also used in manufacturing. 80% of the downtime is typically attributed to the top 20% of causes. So that's essentially where this is from. Now, this table is actually from a sample Pareto analysis sheet, or a sample Excel Pareto sheet, and a link just popped up above my head. This link will give you access to this very same table, and you can input your own causes of work stoppages, your own number of occurrences of those work stoppages, and the Excel spreadsheet will calculate all of these percentages for you, and it'll graph it out for you. So this is a great link. Click on it. It'll take you over to the website, and you'll have access to this very same sample Pareto Excel sheet. Okay? But let's just explain exactly how this is put together. So basically, I analyzed all of the causes of work stoppages over a period of 1 week for this company, and I did this on a macro level in terms of analyzing the entire shop floor. Okay, so I found work instructions. 45 times an operator had to leave the work cell because of poor work instructions. Now, these don't have to be huge periods of downtime. They don't have to be long, prolonged periods of downtime. But any time a production employee or an operator has to leave the work cell because of one of these variables, you can account for it as a cause of work stoppage. Okay, so in this case, 45 times during the week, the operator had to leave the work cell because of poor work instructions. Now, in terms of the individual percentage, this is simply the number of times this happened, 45, divided by the total number of periods of downtime during the week, which is 143, which is just the sum of all of these incidences of lost time or work stoppages. Okay? So 45 divided by 143 is 31%. The next biggest cause of downtime is bill of materials. 40 times during the week, work stoppages occurred. That is 28% of an individual percentage, because it's 40 divided by 143. However, the total percentage is 31% plus 28% equals 59%. Okay, so we're getting closer to that Pareto principle of 80% of the outcome is caused by the top 20% of variables. Okay. Next, work orders. 30 times during the week, work stopped, or there was a work stoppage due to poor work orders. That's 21%, which is basically 30 divided by 143. And here we get 59% plus 21% equals 80%. And right here, we have attained the Pareto principle. So right here, these three causes, we're going to basically say Pareto point, okay? Pareto point, okay? This is 80%. And you see that depicted in this graph, and I'll explain this afterwards. Now, all the other causes, out-of-stock situations, material shortages, lack of tools and equipment, or maybe even machine downtime and assembly outlines, you've got 7, 7, 7, 7, and they account no more than 5%, so they're not that big. And of course, you total it all up, you get 100%, because the total of this divided by 143 is 100%. Okay? So we want to then graph this onto the Pareto chart in order to see exactly whether or not it shows a distribution model that is basically summarized up by the Pareto principle. Okay? So we've got the y-axis here, the x-axis, and we'll call this the z-axis or z-axis. Okay? So the y-axis is basically the number of times work stoppages occurred, and the x-axis is a summary of all the causes of work stoppages. So you've got work instructions, bill of materials, work orders, out-of-stock situations, material shortages, tools and equipment, and assembly outlines. Okay? So first one, work instructions, 45. 45, right here, okay? But it's a 31% of the causes of downtime. So we're going to basically circle this right here, okay? And this would be right around here at 31%. Okay? The next one, bill of materials, right here, 40, just below 45. Okay, it's 28%, but we notice that 28 plus 31 is 59%. So right here would correlate right around here to 59%. Okay? So we're right there. Finally, work orders, 30. Okay, 30 is 21%. 30 divided by 143 is 21%. 21% plus 59 is 80. And that's where we get our Pareto principle, because this is 80%, and I've actually used a green line right here, and I've drawn it up and gone across. And that is basically how you apply this table and turn it into a Pareto principle model on the chart. Okay, so listen. The Pareto principle is a fantastic tool. Companies that look at it in terms of their revenue must focus on leveling out their revenue, okay? Because, when you have 80% of your revenue coming from your top 20% of your customers, when you lose, 20% when you lose one of those customers that are a part of that 20%, it's devastating, okay? But it's not. It doesn't just apply to revenue. It also applies, in this case, to manufacturing. It applies to marketing, it applies to freight management, it applies to inventory management, it also applies to operations, because a lot of times 80% of the work is being done by 20% of your employees, okay? So that's it, Pareto chart. Using the Pareto chart to track the causes of work stoppages and downtime in a manufacturing environment. This table and this graph is available on driveyoursuccess.com. So that's it, Pareto chart, manufacturing work stoppages. Ian Johnson, driveyoursuccess.com. Bye-bye.